I am Mallory Finch, and I never imagined a family dinner would be the beginning of my power shift. But it started with a call I almost didn't answer. To be honest, I was elbow deep in a Jira board when the number popped up. Unknown, San Jose area code. I was about to decline it and go back to finalizing the acquisition brief when something made me pause. I let it ring twice more, then tapped accept. Half distracted, still reading a Slack thread about our QA team's latest panic. I didn't know it yet, but that phone call was the tremor before the quake. But before I tell you how my brother became the unwitting target of my company's biggest acquisition, and how I calmly detonated 15 years of family contempt in one dinner conversation, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. I'm the product director at a mid-size AI firm no one outside the industry can pronounce correctly. We build infrastructure-level solutions. Think sentiment moderation models, behavioral prediction APIs, stuff that scares people if you say it too plainly. I don't usually talk about it at parties. Then again, I don't usually go to parties. My brother Blaine does. He throws them. Often with VC money, always with whiskey. I'm pretty sure he can't spell. He's one of those fast-talking, turtleneck-wearing crypto evangelist turned LLM bros who gets quoted in tech blogs and Forbes listicles. My parents call him our Blaine, with the kind of awe normally reserved for astronauts or surgeons. When I mentioned I'd recently optimized an inference pipeline that shaved 40% off server cost per request, my mom blinked and said, "Oh, honey, you're still doing those little code things?" Little code things. They don't know my title. They've never asked. I doubt they even realize the company I work for is one of the fastest-growing privately held AI firms in the Western Hemisphere. Or that we've been quietly shopping for distressed acquisitions for 9 months. Blaine's startup just happens to be one of them. I didn't plan it. His company popped onto our radar during due diligence, just another over-leveraged pre-Series C with inflated KPIs and crumbling internal tools. But when I saw the name Argonautic, I blinked. I remembered the t-shirts he used to wear to every family gathering. The way my dad would toast him like he was saving Silicon Valley with nothing but a GitHub account and a dream. And suddenly, I was listening a lot more closely. Our CTO flagged the company as a strategic buy. Great branding, awful backend. Whoever built their user interface clearly never met a backend engineer, he muttered, scrolling. Total duct tape job. I said nothing, just bookmarked the file and sat very still. Growing up, Blaine got the spotlight. My sister Claire got the pity. She had a chronic autoimmune thing that made her the object of soft concern and folded blankets. I got functional silence. A family of pedigreed minds, lawyers, academics, patent holders, and I was the one who built robots in the basement while my mother hovered over Claire's herbal supplements and my dad rewrote Blaine's college essays. They thought I was weird. Independent, my aunt called it. Distant, my mother said once, thinking I couldn't hear. What they never saw was how I taught myself Python by age 13, or how I funded my entire undergrad with freelance back-end gigs on the dark web, while Claire's therapist visits and Blaine's startup phase burned through 5 digits a semester. They only noticed when I didn't show up. When I skipped Thanksgiving in 2019, I got one text from my mom that read, "Missing you. Hope your little work is going well." Little work. I think part of me stayed frozen in that phrase. It followed me from apartment to apartment, from DevOps reviews to sprint planning meetings like a tiny mosquito trapped in the back of my skull. I worked late, I over-delivered, I never once asked for credit, because somewhere deep down, I still wanted that text to change. It never did. Not until this year. This year, I said yes to the invitation. Yes to dinner. Yes to pretending I wasn't building the kind of empire Blaine only pretended to understand. Because this time, I knew something they didn't. And it was going to be delicious. The first time I realized I was invisible, I was 11, holding a homemade solar desalination unit in our garage, while Blaine got a standing ovation in the kitchen for burning a frozen pizza ironically and calling it conceptual cuisine. That science fair project? It won regionals. My parents didn't come, they were at one of Claire's piano recitals, though she'd already quit lessons twice by then. My dad sent a text that said, "Do us proud." My mom asked afterward if we had to dress up for it next time. We didn't. That was the rhythm of our house. Blaine performed, Claire collapsed, I built. And building didn't make noise, it didn't interrupt. It didn't bleed emotion across the dinner table or spill ambition in sleek keynote slides. It just existed, in silence, like me. By high school, Blaine was the one to watch. My mom clipped newspaper articles from the local business section when he got into Stanford's undergrad accelerator program. My father started dropping my son Blaine into conversations with the barista like it was an inherited title. Meanwhile, I'd landed a summer internship writing ML optimization scripts for a regional data center. And when I told them over breakfast, my mother said, "Oh, that's lovely, dear. Could you pass the grapefruit?" Not much changed in college. I went to a solid program, University of Washington, not Ivy but strong in CS, and by junior year I was TAing machine learning modules and presenting at minor conferences. I sent my family photos once, me on stage with a mic in one hand and a slide deck behind me titled Decentralized Prediction, Structuring Unstructured Thought. Blaine replied with a thumbs up emoji. My mother never responded. They weren't cruel, that's what made it harder. They were polite. That quiet condescension you can't call out without sounding like the ungrateful one. At holidays, my job became a kind of party trick. Blaine would point at me and say, "Mallory's doing spooky AI stuff now, aren't you?" And I'd smile while Claire laughed, wine sloshing into a ridiculously oversized glass. If I explained what I actually did, their eyes glazed over by the third sentence. Blaine once interrupted to ask, "So is your work like dystopian surveillance or boring back-end?" I said nothing, because anything I said would be filtered through Blaine's booming presence and Dad's casual dismissal. Dad loved Blaine for his showmanship, loved Claire for her fragility, and I became convenient, reliable, the one who didn't make trouble. When Blaine's startup got covered in a Fast Company blurb, my mother printed it and framed it next to his kindergarten fingerprint art. It hung on the stairwell for years. No one ever noticed the TechCrunch piece that featured my design framework, one that's now taught in niche boot camps. I never brought it up. Didn't seem worth the rolled eyes. I was the footnote in my own family. That's what stung the most. Not the lack of love, but the absence of belief. That quiet, patronizing sense that I was competent but unremarkable, useful but unworthy of reverence. The reliable support character in Blaine's startup saga. The tragedy is, I still tried. I still showed up, still brought hostess gifts, still offered to help with Wi-Fi problems and digital calendars. It's humiliating to admit how many nights I stayed up tweaking slide decks for family members applying to fellowships and awards, presentations that I never got a single thank you for. But there's only so many times you can be erased before you begin to vanish on purpose. So I disappeared. Not physically, I still sent birthday cards and signed my name on the Christmas checks my parents wrote from all of us. But emotionally, I started building walls. Around my heart, my calendar, and most importantly, my ambition. Because somewhere around the 4th year of being invisible, I stopped waiting for their validation. And I started building something that didn't need it. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first it was just a need, a quiet hunger to prove, not to them but to myself, that I wasn't crazy for believing I could do something big, something beautiful, something mine. It began late one night in my 3rd year at Lexora, my first real tech job. I was a junior PM buried under legacy dashboards and product debt. Most folks stayed in their lane. I didn't. I kept seeing the same friction points between our machine learning models and the tools we were trying to force around them like two small gloves. So I started sketching, mocking, building in silence. By the time I floated the idea of a modular developer-first training platform, one that learned from user input and improved in real time, my manager shrugged and said, "That's an R&D problem, not product." So I built it on nights and weekends. I called it Vanta. I didn't name it after a person or a clever pun. I named it after Vanta Black, the darkest substance on Earth. It felt right. Silent, absorbing, unnoticed. Vanta was ugly at first, held together with Python, glue code, and way too many sleepless nights. But it worked. Quietly, ruthlessly, it worked. I onboarded 2 friends from a DevTools meetup, then a 4th. We built APIs, designed architecture, streamlined the feedback loop. The magic wasn't in the interface, it was in the way Vanta adapted. Self-learning, developer-friendly, invisible intelligence. It solved the problem before you could articulate it. I kept my day job, paid my dues, but by the time Vanta hit its second year, I had 5 engineers and a beta waitlist that included 3 unicorn companies. That's when Cade emailed. Cade owns Sundrift Systems, a mid-size AI powerhouse with the worst name in tech and the smartest people I've ever met. He'd heard of Vanta through a whisper chain of CTOs and open-source evangelists. He wanted to talk. We didn't meet in a boardroom. We met at an off-brand diner in Mountain View, over curly fries and coffee that tasted like burned promises. He looked at me across cracked formica and said, "You know this could change how we build everything, right?" I nodded slowly. "But only if it's done right." He smiled. "Let's do it right then." That's how I joined Sundrift, not as a founder selling out, but as a director with equity, ownership, and the power to grow Vanta into something real, something scalable, something that would outlast even Blaine's next ego-sculpted startup. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving myself. I was just doing it. Leading a product team of the brightest people I'd ever known, building tech that mattered, shaping the core infrastructure of a company I believed in. No one in my family knew. They thought I still worked in tech. Thought I probably answered emails and drank too much cold brew. They never asked. Even when Sundrift started showing up in niche investor memos, even when our toolsets got quietly licensed by 2 of the big 5, even when my name was on 3 provisional patents. Silence. And I kept it that way, until our CFO handed me a manila folder during one of our late-night war room sessions and said, "This one's special. Their tech is flash, but fragile. Could be our cheapest turnaround yet." I opened it. Argonautic. I didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. Just stared at the numbers, the feature list, the burn rate, the code audit summaries. It was Blaine's startup. All right. Glossy design, terrible infrastructure. A pitch deck that had raised millions but couldn't deliver a stable product. My brother's charm turned into a house of cards. I closed the folder slowly. This wasn't just poetic. It was strategic. By the end of that meeting, I had approval to lead the internal transition if the deal closed. The acquisition would be quiet, no public fanfare, just a sunset clause, a partial talent absorption, and a full IP transfer. They'd never see me coming. And that's when I got the email from my mother. Subject, annual family dinner. "Hi, sweetie. Same place as always, next Friday. Let us know if you're coming so I can adjust the seating. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time, then I clicked reply. I'll be there. I spent the next week in 2 parallel universes. By day I was finalizing the acquisition plan. I led meetings with legal, coordinated handoffs between integration teams, reviewed redundancy options, and flagged potential red lines for our IP council. The Argonautic deal was already in motion. We were just tightening the bolts. By night, I stood in front of my closet and asked questions I hadn't thought about in years. What do you wear to a family dinner where you might accidentally become their boss? What says, "I forgive you," and also, "You've underestimated me for the last time"? In the end, I chose a navy wrap dress I hadn't worn in years. Simple, sharp, unassuming until you looked closer. It reminded me of myself. I paired it with clean white sneakers and a recycled leather bag from a brand no one in my family would recognize. Every piece of it whispered power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that walks into a room and makes it blink. The day of the dinner, I skipped lunch. Not on purpose. I was buried in acquisition logistics and slipped out of the office too late for anything but a granola bar from the micro kitchen. My stomach buzzed from caffeine and adrenaline. I told myself I wasn't nervous. I told myself it didn't matter. But the truth is, I'd rehearsed the night 100 different ways. What if they actually asked about my work? What if they dismissed it again? What if Blaine brought up Argonautic, clueless that I held his fate in my neatly organized Notion dashboard? By the time I reached my parents' house, the sky was turning that soft, suburban dusk color, blue-gray like a secret. The porch lights were on. The roses had been trimmed back, neatly. I parked 2 houses down. I didn't want them watching me pull up in a company-leased EV. I rang the bell. It was Claire who answered, barefoot, holding a glass of something amber. "Well, look who finally came home," she grinned, arms spread in a loose hug I didn't want. "We took bets you'd ghost us again." "Sorry to disappoint," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled the same, lemon oil on the wood floors, something roasted in the oven, the low hum of classical music barely masking the tension in the air. It felt like walking into a play I'd rehearsed all my life, only this time I knew the ending. My father was at the kitchen island sipping red wine and pontificating to Blaine about burn rate realities like he hadn't retired 10 years ago. Blaine, in full smugness mode, nodded with performative interest. He looked exactly like his LinkedIn headshot. Tight polo, bleached smile, beard too deliberate to be real. "Mallory," my dad said, noticing me. "Didn't expect you to make it. Still doing your tech thing?" I smiled. "Still doing my tech thing." No one asked a follow-up. Dinner was already plated. Roasted duck, truffle potatoes, something green and decorative. The table was set with the good china, the kind reserved for holidays and Claire's breakdowns. I found my place between Claire and a cousin whose name I never remembered. The conversation flowed around me like a stream parting around a rock. Updates on Blaine's funding round, Claire's new therapy dog, my mother's new meditation class. I chewed, nodded, sipped water, and waited. No one asked about me. Not even once. It was oddly freeing. I watched them perform the familiar dance. My father cutting off my mother's stories with finance trivia, Claire complaining loudly while accepting compliments, Blaine interrupting every 5 minutes to humble brag about revolutionizing AI ethics, which made me bite the inside of my cheek. They were so certain of the hierarchy, so sure of the pecking order they had built from nothing but noise. And I realized something stunning. They didn't even want to understand me. Understanding would require respect, and respect would require undoing years of comfortable delusion. So I didn't offer any breadcrumbs, I didn't drop hints or dangle achievements, I just observed, like a researcher watching a case study of inherited ego. Halfway through dessert, something citrusy and overplated, my dad cleared his throat and clinked his glass. "I just want to say how proud I am of Blaine," he began, "for pushing through adversity and positioning Argonautic for what I'm sure will be a massive Series D." There it was, the toast. Blaine raised his eyebrows like he hadn't expected it, though he obviously had. Claire clapped. My mother beamed. I took another bite of cake. They had no idea. Not yet. But they would. I always forget how loud silence can be when you're sitting at a table full of people who think they know you, and are so deeply wrong. Blaine's toast echoed in the room like a gavel. He leaned back smugly, his spoon clinking in the ramekin of untouched creme brulee. The sugar crust was cracked but not eaten, like everything he touched. Pretty, performative, half-finished. "Mallory," he said, turning toward me with that grinning condescension that only older siblings and sales guys can perfect. "You still working with, what's the name, Suncloud? Sundial?" "Sundrift," I said evenly. He snapped his fingers. "Right, Sundrift. What do you guys do again? Natural language processing or, like, fitness wearables for dogs or something?" I smiled. "Something like that." The thing about Blaine, he never asks questions unless he already thinks he knows the answer. Or unless he needs the room to know that he doesn't take you seriously. Claire jumped in before I could say more. "Didn't someone from your company get quoted in The Guardian last month?" she asked, eyes wide with pretend interest. That surprised me. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, our COO was interviewed about deepfake moderation and political AI misuse." My mother clapped softly, like I was a toddler showing off finger painting. "Oh, that's so current, honey. You've always been our little tech gal." Little tech gal, I could feel the old heat rising in my chest, that burn that used to drive me into extra credit work and 3 a.m. coding sprints in undergrad. But tonight, it didn't sting the same way. It registered more like amusement, like watching reruns of a show I used to cry over and now just find badly written. They still didn't know. They didn't know that Sundrift wasn't just the place I worked. I was the one who led the build-out of the very platform now powering half our commercial revenue. I was the one who spotted the Argonautic acquisition and quietly slid it across the table at our strategic meeting. I was the reason their Golden Boys company was about to be disassembled, asset by asset. "Are you still coding?" Dad asked, as if he was asking if I still played with Legos. "I direct product strategy now," I said. He squinted. "But you don't manage people, do you?" "I lead 3 teams. "Oh, huh." He looked at my mom. "I thought she said you worked remotely." I blinked. "I do." He nodded like I'd confirmed something disappointing. Blaine leaned in. You should talk to our VP of product. We're exploring some ML integrations in Q4. Could be fun to get your take on things. Real-world feedback. I stared at him. He was genuinely offering me a chance to advise his company. The company I was quietly helping buy, restructure, and, if we were being brutally honest, save from total collapse. And he thought he was doing me a favor. That was the thing about Blaine. He never imagined a world in which someone else had power he didn't know about. His self-image was built like a castle made of glass, reflective, fragile, and loud when it shattered. I clinked my water glass against his wine. I'll keep that in mind. Claire raised an eyebrow. So mysterious tonight. What are you actually working on? Come on, give us one cool project. I debated it for a moment. How easy it would be to blow their minds, to rattle off keywords and headlines. But I resisted the bait. Instead, I said, we're in the middle of a pretty significant partnership deal. Legal says I can't talk about it. My mother gasped. Ooh, secretive. That's how you know it's big. My father looked less amused. Well, just remember, Mallory, business moves fast. You don't want to bet the farm on vaporware. A lot of companies are doing AI, and not all of them are going to survive. I smiled tightly. True, that's why we're buying the ones that won't. He laughed like I was joking. I didn't laugh back. The conversation skittered to a halt for a beat, just long enough to feel like a record scratch. But then Claire asked Mom for more wine, and everyone reset like nothing had happened. The room shifted again. Blaine launched into a news story about a recent panel he sat on. Claire pulled out her phone to show off her dog's Halloween costume. And I sat there, smiling. Not because I was happy, but because the only thing better than justice is knowing it's almost here. It happened over dessert. Of course it did. We were 2 spoonfuls into a tart my mother called store-bought but artfully plated, and my father was midway through another Blaine-centric monologue about the tech economy's natural cleansing phase when the air changed. You could feel it, like a door closing behind you even though no one had moved. Listen, my father began, setting his fork down like he was preparing for a toast. We wanted to say something while everyone's here. Blaine straightened up. Claire tilted her head, curious. I kept my eyes on the tart, my fork gently turning circles through the lemon curd. It's about the family trust, Dad said. We've decided to restructure things. Oh, I thought, here it is. My mother jumped in, her tone rehearsed, overly cheery. You know we love all of you, but we've been advised to think more strategically, about legacy, about protecting our values. Blaine nodded like he already knew. Claire looked vaguely concerned. I sat very still. Dad cleared his throat. Mallory, your professional path has always been a bit harder for us to understand. Translation, not prestigious enough, not visible enough, not easily explained to their dinner party friends. And, he continued, given the volatility of the tech sector, we think it's best to focus the trust's future provisions on more stable heirs, my mother supplied gently. Reliable investments, Dad finished. It wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. They were cutting me out. Just like that. No tantrum, no drama, just this cool, clinical precision, the way you'd retire an old appliance or cancel a subscription. And they were doing it now, in front of Blaine and Claire, like it was a memo that needed distribution. Wait, what? Claire blinked. You're actually disinheriting her? My mother waved a hand, flustered. No one's being disinherited, darling. We're just reallocating some things. Mallory's always been so independent. I looked at her. You mean I've never needed you? She smiled tightly. Exactly, sweetheart. That stung more than I thought it would. Not because I needed the money, I didn't. Not because I wanted the approval, though some sad recessed part of me still did, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected all my life. They didn't see me, not as one of them, not as someone worth betting on, not as a real contender in the family mythology they'd been constructing since Blaine's first business plan and Claire's second autoimmune crisis. I was the footnote. The margin note. The other one. And they were telling me, right here in the soft glow of the chandelier, that I'd always be that. I set my fork down. So let me get this straight, I said calmly. You're removing me from the trust. Because I didn't go to Harvard Law. Because I don't post family selfies on Facebook. Because I don't make sense at dinner parties? My dad looked annoyed. No, because you chose a path we can't validate. We can't vouch for the stability of it. Can't or won't? I asked. My mother sighed. Mallory, don't make this dramatic. I laughed. It was soft, breathy, dangerous. You don't know the meaning of dramatic. Blaine snorted into his wineglass, not even pretending to hide his satisfaction. Mallory, come on. Don't take it personally. It's just structure. Dad's being pragmatic. You've always done your own thing. You mean I've never needed rescuing? You've never built something enduring, Dad said. And just like that, the air left the room. I looked at him. You really believe that? He shrugged. You work in a sector that's constantly pivoting. 1 minute it's chatbots, the next it's whatever it is you do now. You're smart, no doubt, but it's not the same as founding a company, hiring teams, making payroll. And failing upward? I asked. Blaine bristled. I haven't failed. I stared at him. Are you sure? They didn't get it. They had no idea what I was about to walk back into. That I wasn't just making payroll, I was signing off on whether Blaine had payroll next quarter. That the very trust fund they were so proud to reallocate was dwarfed by the equity options I was negotiating behind the scenes of their golden boy's unraveling dream. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. Instead I stood, smoothed the front of my dress, and smiled the kind of smile that only comes right before everything changes. Thanks for dinner, I said softly. I won't forget it. My phone buzzed just as I was slipping on my coat. I hadn't even closed the front door behind me when I glanced at the screen and saw the name light up. Cade. Sundrift subject, deal closed. Move fast. I stepped onto the porch as the cool night air hit my skin like a slap of clarity. Behind me, laughter filtered through the glass. Blaine's voice, too loud, too smug. Claire saying something about the tart. My father pouring more wine. I opened the message. Mallory, Argonautic signed. DocuSign timestamp confirms 8:41 p.m. It's ours. Legal is issuing internal memo at midnight. You have full discretion over the integration rollout. Congrats, Director. I just stood there. Let it wash over me. The company they treated like Blaine's baby, the one they bragged about over dinner and in holiday newsletters, was now a Sundrift asset. And not just that, it was mine to dismantle or save. Mine to rebuild, refine, and repurpose into something actually worth having. I could barely breathe. I walked slowly to my car, every step echoing like a drumbeat in my ears. My mind wasn't spinning. It was quiet, dangerously clear. This was it, the turning point. The moment the story stopped being theirs. I got in the car, closed the door, and stared at the dashboard for a long second. Then I called the number Cade had attached in a follow-up text. Argonautics assigned transition liaison. It rang once. Then, hello? Hi, this is Mallory Finch, Director of Product at Sundrift, I said, my voice smooth, professional, practiced. You'll be receiving a systems access roadmap from me by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Do not alert the executive team until I initiate the onboarding briefing, understood? Silence. Then, yes, ma'am. I hung up and smiled. Ma'am, it was 8:49 p.m. Inside, Blaine was still drinking my father's vintage wine and bragging about how acquisition-hungry the market is lately. He had no idea that as of 8 minutes ago he was the acquisition. No idea that tomorrow morning an email with my name in the from field would land in his inbox with the subject line, Welcome to Sundrift, Transition plus Tech Integration. No idea that he would be invited, not guaranteed, invited, to interview for a continued role under the same product leadership he once referred to as fluff work. I drove off slowly, not in a hurry, letting every mile distance me from the house and every insult they'd ever served chilled. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even grin. What I felt was better than vindication. It was certainty. They had disowned me, but I'd already let them go, and now, I had the final word. Written in contracts and stock options and systems architecture that would outlast every toast and empty compliment they ever gave Blaine. When I got home I poured myself a drink, opened the Vane dashboard and watched the live metrics. Our neural feedback engine was spiking, server load steady, anomaly detection green across the board. My tech was clean, my vision was intact. And my brother's company? Now my sandbox. The best part? Tomorrow, Blaine would walk into his office like nothing had changed, only to find his calendar replaced, his passwords rotated, and his new reporting line directly under me. I thought about calling him, just once, just to say, hey, remember when you offered me feedback opportunities? But I didn't. I was done performing. This wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. Not of relationships, but of reality. And tomorrow, reality would finally arrive at Blaine's doorstep, with my name on the paperwork. The fallout was immediate. At 7:04 a.m., I got a Slack ping from legal. FYI, Blaine Kingsley already emailed asking WTF is this transition memo, not CCing product yet. Want us to loop you in now or wait? I replied, wait, let him sweat. By 7:17, his calendar was wiped clean. By 8, his access was limited to guest mode, no admin privileges, no edit rights, read only on a few core dashboards because I was feeling generous. And by 8:32, my phone rang. It was Blaine. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, then texted, I need to talk to you. You had something to do with this, didn't you? I smiled as I sipped my coffee. Cold brew, no sugar, still bitter, just how I liked it. I waited until 9, then called him back. Not a minute earlier. Let him feel what it was like to not be the center of someone else's urgency. Hey Blaine, I said breezily, as though we hadn't shared duck and inheritance betrayal hours earlier. Mallory, he snapped, what the hell is going on? Didn't you read the memo? You work for Sundrift. I run product at Sundrift, he paused. You're behind this, I smiled, slow and surgical. You're not wrong. His voice pitched up. You knew we were being scouted? You didn't say anything? You let me sit there at dinner and let you what? I cut in. Talk over me? Offer me advice? Toast yourself like it was still 2017? This is sabotage. No, Blaine, this is a strategic acquisition. Your IP was interesting, your codebase was garbage. We're keeping the branding maybe. Jury's out. As for you, you'll be invited to apply for an advisory role, 6-month probation. You can't be serious. I am. The line went silent. Then, this is personal. No, it's business, I said flatly. But it could have been personal if you'd ever treated me like a human being instead of background noise with a LinkedIn page. Mallory, come on, don't do this. Don't throw away. Throw away what, Blaine? I asked, my voice calm but edged now. The support you never gave? The respect you never offered? The family dinners where I got reduced to a punchline? You disowned me last night over a slice of tart, and now you want grace? He didn't respond. I sighed. Look, I'm not vindictive. You've got talent even if it's bloated by your own mythology. But, let's be clear, you work for me now, and you only keep working if you bring something real to the table. More silence. Do you understand? Yeah. Good. You'll get the onboarding schedule by noon. Welcome to Sundrift. I hung up. I didn't feel elated. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt clean. Later that evening I got an email from my mother. Subject, what happened? Blaine says you're involved in some kind of takeover. Is this true? Please explain. Mom, I didn't reply. Then Claire texted. You just made Dad speechless. That's a first. That one made me laugh. I turned off my phone, lit a candle, put on music, something wordless, moody, vast. Then I opened a fresh doc in my project folder labeled Legacy 2.0 and started typing out a new charter, one that wasn't built on pedigree or proximity, but actual value. Because I wasn't just rejecting my family's hypocrisy, I was rewriting the whole damn playbook. They thought legacy came from nameplates, trust funds and dinner party decorum. I knew better now. Legacy came from impact. And the truth? I'd only just begun. It wasn't until the following weekend that I realized how much I'd been holding my breath around my family. The first exhale came at brunch. We were packed into a tiny back table at Clementine's, the kind of place where the menus are handwritten and the coffee comes in chipped mugs that somehow make it taste better. Across from me sat Talia, Sundrift's lead infrastructure engineer and the closest thing I've had to a sibling in years. Next to her was Elias, our operations analyst and my go-to partner for cynical jokes and crisis triage. And me, I was just Mallory again, not the disappointing daughter, not the other sibling. Just me. Elias raised his glass of grapefruit juice. To poetic justice, Talia added, and to watching tech bros squirm under competent leadership. I laughed, really laughed, and clinked my glass against theirs. There was no need to perform here. No need to defend acronyms or downplay success for the sake of someone else's ego. When I spoke, they listened. When I didn't, they still saw me. After eggs and sourdough, we lingered over coffee. Talked shop a little, then drifted to gossip, then to nothing at all. Just space, just silence, the good kind. These people weren't related to me by blood, but they were mine. I'd spent so much of my life chasing scraps of attention from people who loved their own image of me more than my reality. And here, in the steam of fresh coffee and sunlight through foggy glass, I realized I'd built a different kind of family. One forged through midnight stand-ups, shipping disasters, and lunch runs that turned into therapy sessions. People who knew the inside of my ambition and respected it, not feared it. People who didn't ask what school I went to or whether my last name would fit on a plaque. People who stayed. The contrast was blinding. At home, I had to earn space at the table. Here, they pulled up a chair without me asking. Later, Talia caught me zoning out and nudged my elbow. "You okay?" I nodded, just thinking. "About?" I hesitated, then said, "How this feels like the first time I've been wanted without having to prove I belong." She didn't blink, just said, "You built that. You earned that. We follow you because you're the real deal, not because you're loud about it." It landed somewhere deep. When I left brunch, I didn't go home. I went to the waterfront, sat on a bench with my tablet and opened a blank note. Title: The Chosen versus the Biological. I started writing. Not code, not strategy, not integration timelines, just reflections. Of all the things I'd gained in the wake of the acquisition, this realization was the most powerful. Family isn't sacred if it asks you to shrink. And the people who helped you expand, those were the ones worth building with. Worth trusting. Worth choosing. For years, I'd let my self-worth be measured against the yardstick of bloodline expectations. Now I was measuring it by something else entirely. Who feels like home when they look at you? Not for what you should have been. Not for what you failed to be, but for what you are. And when I stood up from that bench, I felt something click back into place, a kind of reassembly, a kind of peace, because I wasn't alone anymore. I was finally surrounded by people who didn't need my silence to feel smart. People who never made me earn their decency. And unlike the family I'd been born into, this one knew exactly what I was worth. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to answer the phone when it rang with a family member's name. So when Claire called the next morning, I stared at it for a full 5 rings before declining. Then I blocked the number. It wasn't petty, it was preservation. I'd spent too many years being accessible to people who only remembered I existed when it served a narrative. Someone to fill a seat at the table, someone to roll their eyes at across the roast chicken, someone to dismiss because it was easier than admitting I'd outpaced them. Not anymore. Boundary setting used to feel like punishment. Like a wall I was throwing up because I didn't know how to love correctly. But now it felt like a filter, and I was curating my peace. I made a list, a literal list, on paper. New rules of engagement: if you call only to ask for something, don't call. If you dismiss my work, you don't get to benefit from it. If you only want to be proud of me when it's easy, I don't need it. I kept the list taped to my fridge, right next to a magnet that said, "You are not hard to love, just hard to manipulate." And I enforced it. When Blaine emailed 2 days later with a subject line that read, "Okay, can we talk?" I replied with one sentence: "Happy to discuss professional matters. Please direct personal topics elsewhere." I didn't hear from him again. Not until the Sundrift onboarding team looped me in on his welcome session, where he sat awkwardly in a breakout Zoom room with 2 junior PMs who, bless them, had no idea they were watching a man unravel. I didn't attend. I didn't need to, because I had bigger things to build. I focused instead on hiring, on mentoring, on finding people who reminded me of myself 10 years ago. Smart, quiet, overlooked, and giving them everything I never got: context, credit, and the courage to take up space. One of them, a junior dev named Penny, sent me a Slack message after her first week that read, "I've never had a manager ask what I want to grow into. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time, long enough for my eyes to sting. Because that's how it starts, right? You heal the wound by never handing the knife to someone else again. I scheduled weekly one-to-ones with everyone, asked about dreams, not just deliverables, rewarded clarity, not charisma. And slowly the company started shifting. Not just because I was building something new, but because I was building with new rules I didn't have to twist myself to fit into. One morning, I got an internal email from someone in finance I barely knew. Subject: "You're the reason I stayed. Just wanted to say that your leadership has changed the way I see myself. Thank you for being a blueprint we didn't know we needed." I closed the email, took a long sip of coffee, and let myself feel it. Not the pride, not the power, the freedom. Because for the first time in my life, no one could define me without my permission. Not my parents, not my brother, not the family dinner where I was erased like a footnote in my own story. They had their truth. Now I had mine, and the best part? I wasn't using mine to destroy theirs. I was just using it to build better. The first time someone called me a legacy builder, I almost corrected them. It was during a panel at an industry event, one of those smaller boutique conferences where the lanyards are recycled and the speakers actually listen to each other. I just finished talking about ethical AI scaffolding and human-centered infrastructure when the moderator said, "Mallory Finch isn't just leading change, she's shaping a legacy." I blinked. A legacy? That word had always felt out of reach, like something engraved into stone for people with coat of arms surnames or multi-generational company plaques. In my family, legacy belonged to my father's tenure, Claire's health struggles, and of course Blaine's press mentions. Me, I was the appendix, useful only if you knew what it did, but now someone had said it out loud, in public, on a stage, and no one laughed. When the panel ended, a young engineer approached me with a notebook full of scribbles and nervous energy. "I'm trying to build something too," she said, "but my family doesn't get it. They think it's a phase, that I should go back to med school." I nodded, deeply. "They'll come around." She bit her lip. "What if they don't?" I smiled. "Then you build anyway." That stuck with me. Because the truth is, I stopped waiting for approval the day I realized some people aren't capable of seeing you clearly. They're only capable of seeing you as the mirror that reflects back their own sense of importance. And if you stop reflecting, they look right past you. So I stopped being their mirror, and I became my own damn light source. I began funding projects I believed in, open access AI tools for under-resourced schools, mentorship programs for neurodivergent coders, grants for women in infrastructure roles. No fanfare, just function. We quietly spun off Vanta into an independent, open core initiative. Not for profit, for impact. It felt right. I no longer needed to be the star of anyone else's story. I just wanted to be the reason someone else didn't quit too soon. That was the legacy I wanted. Not one built on bloodlines or dinners or who got mentioned in the family newsletter, but on choices, on impact, on people I might never meet doing things I'll never take credit for, because they felt seen by someone who'd once been invisible too. Sundrift gave me stock, Vanta gave me pride, but this quiet, steady reclamation of worth on my own terms, this gave me peace. I didn't burn the family name, I just built something next to it, something bigger. And when the two are one day listed side by side, I want the record to show. Mine lasted longer. The call came on a Wednesday. Not from Blaine, not from my parents, from a reporter. She introduced herself politely, explained she was writing a piece on Sundrift's recent acquisition run, and asked if I'd be open to talking about the human side of tech leadership. I almost said no. I'd gotten good at staying behind the curtain, letting the product speak, letting the results stand. But something in her voice, genuine curiosity, not just headline hunting, made me pause, so I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe near the office. She asked me about my work, about the industry, and then gently, as if tiptoeing toward a sore spot, she asked, "Is it true you're related to Blaine Kingsley?" I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said, "we're siblings." She blinked. That must have been complicated. I smiled. That's one word for it. She asked if I wanted to go on record. I thought for a moment, then said, "Print whatever you like. Just make sure the story isn't about who I'm related to. Make it about what we built." She nodded. And for once, someone actually did. When the article came out a week later, it was titled "The Invisible Architect: How Mallory Finch Quietly Built the Tech We All Rely On." I didn't cry. I didn't print it and send it to my parents. I didn't forward it to Claire. I just read it and let it live. As a marker. A timestamp. A quiet recognition that didn't beg for applause. A few days later, I got a card in the mail, no return address, just my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "We were wrong. I hope it's not too late." No signature, no explanation. I sat with it for a long time, then I folded it shut and tucked it into the drawer next to my charger cables and old passport, not to forget it, but to remember that forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. Sometimes it just means locking it without bitterness. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection, not searching for approval or assurance, but just presence. I'd made it, through silence, through dismissal, through the ache of being the footnote in my own family's story, and now I was the author of my work, my worth, my peace. I didn't need their apology to validate me, because I'd already validated myself, and that kind of peace? It's louder than any toast. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best? I have. And maybe you have too. Whether it was your family, your peers, your boss, or even your own voice whispering self-doubt, there's a particular kind of pain in being dismissed while you're still quietly building. A loneliness in watching others get credit while you're still laying the foundation. But here's the thing. Some legacies are quiet at first. They don't arrive with applause or headlines. They grow in silence, they sharpen in rejection, they solidify in moments when you finally say, "Enough. I know who I am whether you do or not." If my journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on your own terms. And in the comments, I'd love to hear your story. Tell me, what did you build when no one believed in you? Because somewhere out there, someone else is building quietly right now, wondering if they'll ever be seen. Let them know they're not alone. And remember, legacy doesn't come from the family you're born into. It comes from the impact you choose to make. Even if no one claps for you at first, you build anyway.